The first cry shattered the stillness of the Alaskan night at exactly 5:42 a.m. Eleanor Ellie Carter jolted awake, her breath fogging in the cold air of her cabin. At 55, she had spent decades embracing the rugged solitude of this land, yet she had never heard a sound like this. It wasn't the sharp howl of a wolf, nor the distant bellow of a moose. It was something else entirely. She pulled her woolen robe tighter and padded barefoot to the window, coffee long forgotten on her bedside table. Outside, the thermometer nailed to her porch read 38 degrees, the kind of cold that could freeze exposed skin in minutes. Snow had fallen thick overnight, blanketing her property in an untouched layer of white, reflecting the eerie glow of a sky caught between dawn and darkness. Then she saw it. Near the edge of her property, where her old barn leaned against time, a massive shape lay half-buried in the snow. At first she thought it was a fallen tree, a casualty of last night's storm. But then it moved. Ellie's stomach clenched as the creature shifted slightly, its labored breath sending weak puffs of mist into the frigid air. The second cry came, a deep, haunting wail that hovered somewhere between animal and human, sending a shiver down her spine. A bear? A Kodiak, judging by its sheer size. Though that shouldn't have been possible, these giants roamed the coastal regions, not this far inland. What was it doing here, and why was it trapped in the snow? Years of living in the wild had drilled certain rules into her. Never approach a bear, especially in winter. Hunger made them unpredictable, desperate, and yet, this was different. Through the frost-laced window, the bear's eyes met hers, and Ellie felt a jolt of something deep in her bones. There was no wild rage, no primal fear, just awareness, a sharp, piercing intelligence in those golden irises that seemed to plead rather than threaten. Then, just as she was about to step away, the bear lifted one front paw slightly, as if beckoning her forward. Ellie exhaled, a cloud of uncertainty forming in the cold air of her cabin. She knew one thing for certain. Whatever was happening out there was not natural. Ellie Carter had spent years learning the language of the wild, the silent cues of the wind, the shifting moods of the forest, the wary glances of a predator before it strikes. And yet, nothing in her decades of living alone in the Alaskan wilderness had prepared her for this moment. She stood at the window, breath shallow, pulse pounding against her ribs. Every rational part of her screamed to stay inside, to leave the bear to its fate. This was nature's way, survival of the fittest. But another part of her, deeper and more primal, whispered that something about this was wrong. The bear wasn't thrashing in a panic. It wasn't growling or baring its teeth in a desperate struggle. It was waiting. Ellie grabbed her coat, yanking it over her shoulders with quick, practiced movements. Her boots followed, then a thick scarf, gloves, and a knit hat pulled low over her ears. It wasn't just the cold she was preparing for. It was whatever she was about to face out there. She hesitated at the door, her fingers hovering over the old brass handle. This is insane, she told herself. It's a bear, a 1,500-pound killing machine, and you're walking straight toward it. But those eyes, the intelligence behind them had been undeniable. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped into the freezing dawn. The cold hit her like a wall, burning her lungs as she trudged through the knee-deep snow. The bear's breathing was ragged now, the weak puffs of steam from its nostrils growing fainter. It was freezing to death. As she got closer, the sheer size of the creature became overwhelming. Lying there in the snow, partially encased in ice, the bear was a mountain of muscle and fur, its massive shoulders rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. Ellie crouched a safe distance away, her instincts battling with her curiosity. "Hey there, big guy," she murmured, half expecting her voice to startle the animal into a final burst of aggression. But it didn't even flinch. Instead, it blinked slowly, deliberately, almost as if acknowledging her presence. Something passed between them then, a silent understanding, a fragile thread of trust woven in the space between two very different creatures. Ellie knew what she had to do. She turned and half ran back to the cabin, fumbling for supplies: a metal pot, a thermos of scalding water, her thickest work gloves, a shovel. She wasn't sure if any of it would be enough, but she had to try. By the time she returned, the bear's eyes were struggling to stay open. The eerie stillness of the wilderness wrapped around them, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Ellie knelt beside the creature and began pouring the hot water around the frozen edges of the ice trapping its body. Steam curled into the air, and for the first time, something shifted beneath the snow. The ice began to crack, and beneath it, something began to glow. Ellie Carter had expected a lot of things when she decided to help the bear. A struggle, maybe even a near-death experience. What she hadn't expected was this. She had seen plenty of strange sights in the Alaskan wilderness, but snow that glowed wasn't one of them. The steam from the hot water curled in the air, creating a ghostly mist around her and the bear. A faint, pulsing blue light flickered beneath the ice, barely visible at first, but unmistakable. Ellie froze, gripping the metal pot in her gloved hands. Was she imagining this? The morning light was weak, casting long shadows across the snow, but this glow, this was something else. The bear, still trapped but slowly regaining strength, stared at the glow too, its golden eyes locked onto the light beneath them. It wasn't frightened. If anything, it seemed expectant. Ellie's breath clouded in the freezing air as she set the pot aside and grabbed her shovel. Whatever was under there, she needed to see it. She worked quickly, the adrenaline in her veins keeping the cold at bay. The more she dug, the stronger the light became. It wasn't a reflection of the sun, nor was it some natural phenomenon like ice crystals catching the light. This was something buried, something deep, something unnatural. After what felt like an eternity, Ellie's shovel struck something solid, not rock, metal. She sucked in a sharp breath, glancing at the bear, as if it might have answers. It watched her intently, as if urging her on. Heart-pounding, Ellie crouched and brushed away more snow with her hands. A perfect circular hatch revealed itself, embedded in the frozen earth. 6 feet in diameter, covered in frost and humming with an energy she could feel in her fingertips. The metal was old, but not rusted, as if time had preserved it. Then she saw the markings. Faded but still legible, stamped into the steel in bold, unmistakable letters. U.S. Government Restricted Access. Project Sentinel. Ellie's breath hitched. She had lived in Alaska for decades, but she had never heard of Project Sentinel. She reached out hesitantly, gloved fingers tracing the letters. As she did, the bear, this massive, powerful beast that should have fled the moment it was free, lifted one enormous paw and pressed it firmly against the hatch. A low mechanical whir echoed beneath them. Ellie scrambled back, heart hammering. The ground beneath the snow shifted, ice cracked, snow collapsed into itself. And then the hatch unlocked with a deep, resonating click. The bear turned to Ellie. Its intelligent eyes met hers once more, and in that moment, she realized something chilling. He had led her here on purpose. This wasn't just about saving the bear. The bear had been leading her to whatever lay beneath this door. Ellie Carter had spent decades alone in the Alaskan wilderness, but never, not once, had she felt this kind of fear. Not the instinctive, primal fear of facing a wild predator. No, this was something different. This was the fear of stepping into the unknown. The hatch had unlocked with a deep mechanical click, and now it sat slightly ajar, revealing a narrow metal staircase spiraling into the frozen earth. A faint blue glow pulsed from somewhere deep below, illuminating the entrance like the mouth of an abyss. Ellie swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, and yet the bear didn't hesitate. Titan, as she had come to call him, stepped forward with deliberate intent. There was no fear in its massive frame, no hesitation. The bear was leading her somewhere, just as it had led her to the hatch in the first place. Ellie exhaled sharply, tightening her grip on the flashlight in her hand. "If I die down there," she muttered under her breath, "at least it won't be from boredom." With that, she stepped forward and followed the bear into the darkness. The air grew noticeably warmer as she descended. The further she went, the more unnatural it felt. The permafrost should have kept the tunnels icy, but down here, Ellie could feel heat radiating from the walls, as if something was still running, still alive. Her boots echoed softly against the metal steps, the sound swallowed quickly by the vast silence below. Then she reached the bottom, and her breath caught in her throat. She was standing inside a vast underground chamber, at least the size of a football field. The walls were lined with old computer terminals, cables running like veins across the ceiling, long abandoned workstations covered in dust. But the strangest part wasn't the size of the room. It was the fact that it wasn't abandoned. Faint blue lights blinked from control panels, screens flickered with data she couldn't begin to understand. And then, in the center of the room, behind a massive reinforced glass barrier, there were more bears? Ellie's breath hitched. 3 of them, standing, watching, just like Titan. Each of them wore something that sent a chill through her bones. A leather collar with a metal identification tag, nearly identical to the one around Titan's neck. Her flashlight caught the engraved letters on one of them. Project Sentinel, Asset 3. AF. Her heart pounded. This wasn't a wildlife research facility. This wasn't some forgotten Cold War bunker. This was something else entirely. Titan let out a deep rumbling sound. Not a growl, but a signal. The 3 bears responded in kind, stepping forward in eerie unison. Ellie took a step back, pulse hammering. Then, from somewhere deeper in the facility, a machine powered on, and a voice, automated, mechanical, and chillingly human, echoed through the chamber. Project Sentinel reactivated. Stand by for mission protect. Ellie barely had time to process what was happening before Titan turned to her. And for the first time, she understood. He hadn't just been asking for help. He had been bringing her here because she was part of this now. Ellie Carter had spent her life believing she understood the wild. She had studied it, respected it, lived alongside it. But nothing in her years of experience had prepared her for this. The underground chamber hummed with a low, steady vibration, as if something ancient had just awakened. The blue glow from the control panels cast eerie shadows across the walls, illuminating dust-covered terminals and forgotten technology. Ellie's breath came in shallow gasps as she turned, her boots crunching against the cold metal floor. Titan, the bear she had saved, stood beside her, his golden eyes locked onto a massive, reinforced glass enclosure at the center of the room. Inside were 3 more bears. But these weren't ordinary grizzlies. They moved with deliberate precision, their massive paws interacting with control panels as if they had been trained to do so. The air in the room felt charged, thick with something Ellie couldn't quite name, an intelligence beyond instinct, beyond survival. Her gaze fell to the metal collars around their necks. Each one bore a government-issued tag, the faded engraving just barely visible in the dim light. Project Sentinel, Asset 3. Ellie's heart pounded. She turned toward Titan, her mind racing. What is this place?" she whispered, though she knew the bear wouldn't answer. Instead, he moved. With a quiet rumble, Titan stepped toward a large control console, his claws clicking against the smooth floor. He lifted his massive paw and pressed it firmly against a specific section of the console. The chamber shuddered. Screens flickered to life. Old, grainy footage appeared. Scientists in lab coats working alongside bear cubs, training them, teaching them. Then, a voice. Project Sentinel, initiated, 1962. Diatribe, inopulous wildlife guardians for national security. Ellie felt her stomach drop. This wasn't just a wildlife experiment. This was a military program. The voice continued, cold, clinical. Genetic enhancement success. Subjects display heightened intelligence, strategic thinking, and environmental adaptation beyond expectation. These allies must certainly be respected. Ellie's breath hitched. The footage changed. Images of bears maneuvering through military training exercises, responding to human commands, monitoring seismic activity. These weren't just animals. They had been engineered to be something more. Then the final piece. A heavily redacted file flashed onto the screen. Project termination 1985. Reason classified. Ellie turned toward Titan, her throat dry. They shut it down, but you're still here. Titan rumbled softly. And suddenly Ellie understood. The bears had never stopped their mission. For decades, they had remained hidden beneath the ice, maintaining the facility, continuing their surveillance, waiting for the moment they would be needed again. And now, with the earth shifting, the mountains groaning under unseen pressure, that moment had come. The chamber vibrated beneath Ellie's feet, a deep, unsettling tremor rolling through the underground facility like a warning. The screens continued flickering, data streams cascading across the monitors, revealing something far more terrifying than she had imagined. A massive seismic event was coming. She scanned the glowing maps, her heart pounding. Red indicators pulsed along the mountain range, each one marking increasing geological instability. Ellie wasn't a scientist, but she knew enough to understand what she was looking at. A major earthquake was imminent. Her breath hitched as more data scrolled across the screen. Fault lines shifting, pressure building beneath the Earth's crust, warning signals flashing in bold red letters. Potential surface collapse detected. Estimated time frame, 72 hours. She turned to Titan, her hands shaking. You knew. The bear didn't react, but Ellie could feel it, an unspoken understanding between them. Titan and the others hadn't just been watching this facility, they had been monitoring the entire mountain range. And now the time for silence was over. A hidden threat beneath the ice. Ellie turned her attention back to the screen. Another alert flashed, displaying a network of underground tunnels and sealed-off facilities, many of which were dangerously close to the unstable fault lines. Her eyes widened. The earthquake wouldn't just shake the mountains, it would expose long-buried military installations, places meant to remain hidden forever. Marceres, extra painful therapy. I think I don't want any part of this. HODS, biologists, sacrificial entreaty. A novel exposure therapy. Classified installations at risk of expulsion. Ellie swallowed hard. The U.S. government had abandoned Project Sentinel, but the consequences of their past actions were about to resurface. If those buried facilities collapsed, classified technology, experimental research, and potentially hazardous materials could be unearthed, and there was no telling who might find them first. The bears had been guarding these secrets for decades, and now they were telling Ellie it was time to act. The call that changed everything. Ellie grabbed her radio, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the frequency. If she was going to report this, she had to be careful. She pressed the button. This is Ellie Carter. I need immediate contact with park rangers and government geological experts. There's an active seismic threat. Repeat, an imminent, large-scale event. Static crackled, then a voice responded. Ellie? We've been picking up irregular activity, but nothing confirmed. How do you know this? She hesitated. She couldn't tell them the truth. No one would believe her if she said a group of enhanced bears had been monitoring the seismic shifts for decades. Instead, she chose her words carefully. I have access to old monitoring equipment from a decommissioned facility. The data is clear. This is real, and we have less than 3 days before a major event. A long pause, then the ranger's voice came back, now edged with concern. He put, "We're escalating this to higher authorities." Ellie exhaled, but her relief was short-lived. Behind her, Titan let out a low, guttural rumble, his gaze locked onto something beyond the monitors. Ellie turned, and her blood ran cold. The data on the screens had shifted. The tremors weren't just localized anymore. They were spreading, and the countdown had just accelerated. Ellie barely had time to process the accelerating seismic countdown before the radio crackled again. "Ellie Carter, this is Colonel Richards, U.S. Special Operations Division. You are instructed to remain at your current location. A rapid response team has been dispatched to your coordinates." Her stomach tightened. This was bigger than she thought. She turned to Titan, whose massive form stood motionless beside her. His golden eyes flickered toward the monitors, the blue glow reflecting off his thick fur. He knew what was coming. The bears had been waiting for this moment. The arrival. It didn't take long. Within the hour, the deep, rhythmic thud of helicopter rotors echoed through the frozen valley above, followed by the rumbling approach of military vehicles carving paths through the snow. Ellie climbed back up to the surface, shielding her eyes from the powerful floodlights piercing the darkness. Dozens of armed personnel moved with tactical precision, their expressions unreadable beneath helmets and visors. They weren't just rangers or geological experts. These were high-level military operatives. The lead officer, Colonel Richards, approached, his gaze sharp as he scanned Ellie, then the ground beneath her boots. He knew exactly what lay below. "Where is the entrance?" he asked. Ellie hesitated, but before she could answer, a deep rumbling growl sounded from the shadows of the trees. The soldiers stiffened, rifles shifting toward the sound. Titan emerged from the tree line, his towering form stepping into the artificial light. Behind him, the other sentinel bears followed, their eyes gleaming like sentinels of an ancient secret. The team's reaction was instant. Shouted orders, weapons raised, tension thick in the freezing air. Ellie threw herself between them. "Stop," she shouted. "They're not attacking." For a long, unbearable moment, no one moved. Then Colonel Richards did something that made Ellie's breath catch. He lowered his weapon. And then, as if acknowledging an old ally, he gave the bears a slow, deliberate salute. Titan nodded. The truth confirmed. Within hours, the military had secured the underground facility, extracting classified files and data. Project Sentinel had never truly been forgotten. Ellie watched as the soldiers worked, but her focus remained on Titan and the others. The government would never admit to what these bears were. But Ellie knew the truth. And so did they. As the first tremors shook the mountains, Titan turned away from the soldiers and back toward the wilderness. His mission was complete. But his watch was never over. Life often presents us with mysteries. Some we seek and others find us when we least expect them. Eleanor Carter never intended to uncover a buried secret, nor did she anticipate forming an unspoken bond with an extraordinary creature. But when the moment came, she chose compassion over fear, curiosity over ignorance, and trust over doubt. The story of Project Sentinel reminds us that true guardianship is not about power, but about responsibility. For decades, the bears had protected secrets that were never theirs to keep, fulfilling a mission that humans had long abandoned. They did not act out of obligation, but out of an innate sense of duty. How often do we, as humans, forget the weight of the responsibilities we carry? For those in the later seasons of life, this lesson rings especially true. We too are guardians of wisdom, memories, and values that must be preserved and passed on. Like Titan and his kind, our greatest legacy is not in what we own, but in what we protect. The stories we share, the lessons we impart, and the lives we touch. Sometimes, the greatest truths are hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right person to uncover them. And sometimes, being a guardian means knowing when to step forward and when to let go. Some stories remind us that the world still holds wonders beyond our understanding. Ellie and Titan's journey is a testament to the power of trust, courage, and unseen guardians who protect the world in silence. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring tales of friendship, loyalty, and resilience.